Hey, it's lesbians versus their moms for your ears, not your eyes. And we were really tired when we recorded this one. I do apologize. Hello, and welcome to Wizards versus Lesbians. My name is Isaac.
And I, unfortunately, am Alexis.
We're both very tired today, but we're going to try to do this book justice. Today's book is Provenance by Ann Leckie. We wanted to do some Ann Leckie on here, but the ancillary trilogy, which I would say is Anne's best known work, does not contain lesbians as such, on account of everybody being gendered in a way that does not make lesbianism possible. This takes place in the same universe, but it takes place outside the Raj, which means that there are people with female gender, along with a number of other exciting genders. So at least we have lesbians.
Yes.
Not entirely sure about the wizards, but...
No, but I feel like this touches on a lot of the same themes as the Wizards versus Lesbians microgenre. And so even though we don't have a singular wizard figure, I feel like this book is still in conversation with Wizards versus Lesbians books.
And I'll accept that because we've already read it for this week, and we have a podcast to record. Would you like to do the plot, or shall I?
Why don't you?
Okay. So we begin our story with a character, and oh no.
Okay, let me give this a try.
No, I can do this.
Okay.
I can do this. I've just forgotten everybody's name.
Ingray?
So there's this girl, right? And she's part of the society where part of the deal is that big families tend to adopt children from other families and then also foster more children from like public orphanages, because children are essentially treated as disposable property in this system. Our hero has been was adopted by a powerful senator, essentially, with designs on even higher office. And the way this senator likes to deal with her children is to make them compete to see who will be her heir and take on her name. And so the daughter has gone to space to do something really stupid, which is to break the son of another powerful senator, her mom's rival, out of something called compassionate removal, which is basically
Prison Planet.
Prison Planet, space, lifetime exile, horrible stuff. This should be impossible, but she doesn't know that, and she succeeds. And then a twisting tale of intrigue, politics, and murder ensues.
See, the thing I love about this description of the book is that your plot summary has covered the first 20 pages and made it sound way more dramatic than it actually is, because Ingray spends most of those 20 pages just crying a lot because she's in over her head.
Yes, this character is also, I forget what her textual age is.
Like 23.
Yeah, she comes off as super in over her head throughout pretty much the majority of the book. But that's cool. It's a thing that we're not used to getting from our protagonists.
Are there lesbians?
Yes, Ingray is definitely into a particular girl, at least.
Yes. For a given value of girl. Are there wizards?
No.
Not really.
There are bad parents. This is basically
there are bad parents.
Queer kids versus bad parents.
Yeah, this is basically queer kids versus awful parents.
It's queer people versus their parents.
There are a variety of genders, and a lot
True.
of space politics. And so, why should you read this book?
You like Cherry again?
Yeah, there's some great
big whack of Cherry
you,
off of this one.
Did you catch the special foreigner reference?
Which special foreigner reference?
Where the ambassador dresses all in white. The Raj ambassador dresses all in white. this is specifically a foreigner reference. In the original Ancillary trilogy, the Presker translators even have like the ponytail braid thing.
Indeed, indeed. It's kind of funny then that this particular ambassador is so incredibly both incompetent and uncaring about her job. Yeah, no, it's like this is it's a murder mystery. I mean, even though the mystery is, wrapped up pretty quickly, but we also get the political intrigue about it. There's, uh, diplomacy stuff. If you liked the Texcalan books,
But
you'll
you
like
want
this.
right, if you like the Texcon books, but you want something that's a lot shorter.
Yep, and this one's a little mouthful.
And and lighter. And if you like Cherry, but again, you want something that's shorter and lighter. Especially than like earlier Cherry. These days she's sort of settled into she's hit her stride with the foreigner books.
Yeah, this feels sort of more like late foreigner tonally. You know that nothing really bad is going to happen. Or you suspect at least that nothing really bad is going to happen.
Right. So yeah, it's fun. It deals with gender in interesting ways. It deals with a fairly light touch. It deals with bad parenting. It shows you a wide variety of bad parenting, the different ways that parents can be bad at their job. And it deals with that again with a sort of, fairly gently, but also gently in the sense that there's not a lot of like deep emotional angst, but it's also very straightforward about how bad all of these parents are.
Yes. As for why you shouldn't read this book, pretty much the only thing that I can think of is that it's one of those books where you're going to figure out what's happening way before the point of view character does, which can be a little frustrating. And the point of view character is definitely very damp.
Especially, I would say, especially in the first third of the book. She sort of, I mean, she spends a lot of time crying throughout the book, but she really starts to take initiative and come into her own over the course of the book. But the first like quarter, she spends most of it crying and going, "What am I going to do?" And mostly everyone around her is like, "I don't know. Sounds like a you problem."
Yeah. So that's like a minor thing. And if you're annoyed by that, it's, again, this book is very short, and so a quarter of it doesn't amount to much. Right. So you can wait for her to kind of get her feet underneath her. Anything else? Like the bad parent content warning is...
murder. There's murder in this book.
There is murder,
Somebody gets murdered. Several people. One person gets straight up murdered. One other person dies in battle, or in like combat-ish.
True. But yeah, I mean, by the standards of the books that we tend to read, this is a
very light book.
This is a pretty light, gentle one. Yep. Anything else that we should mention before we move on into the spoiler zone then?
I don't think so.
All right. I actually did want to mention something. If you were going to get the audiobook of this, some very strange decisions based from the narrator. It's another one of those books where the narrator is giving every distinct sort of species and culture different accents, which I appreciate because it helps the audio listener, keep everything straight for long books, but it's not particularly necessary for this one. And some of her choices seem quite random, and also she does voices for the Gek and for the for the police the deputy chief who is from the wrong side of the tracks, or not from the wrong side of the tracks, from an immigrant family
and religious minority,
from a religious minority, basically the Muslim. She gives him like an Apu level Indian accent, and the Gek she gives a sort of a level Chinese accent.
That's certainly some
it's a very strange decision to have made in the year of our Lord 2021 or whenever this came out. So if that's going to bug you, read the text rather than listen to the audiobook. I think that I had a better time reading it on paper than I did listening to it.
That's a content warning right there.
Yes. Right, onto the spoiler zone. To the spoiler zone we go to discuss the things we know. So yeah, we have 3 genders here.
4. We actually have 4 genders in Gray's society, because children are
children are their own gender.
Because we have basically male, female, Neiman, and then undecided.
Yes, we have he, him, she, her, em, and they, them for kids.
Yes.
And you apparently get to choose your own gender as you when you decide that you're an adult. Which
yes, you in fact have to choose your own gender when you decide you're an adult.
Yes, which doesn't seem to be based on anything biological. No genitals are mentioned
right.
in this book, as they aren't in the Ratch books. It is uncertain whether in this future humanity has evolved beyond the need for genitals or reproduction.
Well, that's established in the Ratch books. Most people have that. There's gender is not, or genitalia is not particularly necessary because there's heavily artificially assisted reproduction.
Yes.
Breck makes a throwaway comment about it.
So regardless of what's going on in the societies, and it's clear that there is at least a little bit of there's a lot of racism still in this world, thrown at, across human polities, within human polities, between human polities and alien polities, between the Ratch and everybody else, because the Ratch are England. But there's no sexism, because gender is essentially just, and it's unclear as to what prompts a given person to choose a particular gender in this society, because we're not.
I would say that if I have one criticism of this, there's a very brief line about how Ingray isn't going to use this fake identity that she bought on herself, because she doesn't feel like she could pass as Neiman. So clearly there are distinctions between the genders, like social distinctions and things that are expected of your behavior. But
we never get told what any of that is.
We never get told what any of that is, and like what it would mean to pass as Neiman and whatever. And as somebody who's as like politically attuned and socially aware, despite her dampness as Ingray, I think that's actually a failure of the world building.
I mean, if nothing else, it just leaves a bunch of interesting stuff unpicked up. Like I would have liked to have known, like at least an aside as to why you would be able to tell a Neiman from a man or a woman on sight,
right?
Or by the way they act,
right?
Because like a lot of, we get to describe people's appearances, how they dress. You can apparently use the clothes of somebody of a different gender without.
Most people wear. Well, it's interesting because people in the society wear lungies, which are in fact a unisex garment, but. Traditionally, they're often, depending on the culture, folded and wrapped in different ways, or tied in different ways based on gender in real life.
Where in the real world are lungies worn?
Like all across South and Southeast Asia.
Okay, I didn't know the word before I read this book, and so I was having a hard time picturing it.
Yeah, no, the word I think is for the Burmese or Myanmar garment, but like it's pretty similar to a sarong, and you'll also see I own one, and that Lee brought back when Lee was in Southeast Asia, and when I tie, and at one point I was tying it in the male style just because it's less likely to fall down that way, and Steffi, my roommate from southern India at the time, laughed at me and told me that I looked like an old man, because that's what old men in Kerala also wear. So
the lungi, according to Wikipedia, originated in Bengal and is mostly worn by men except in the Punjab and Thailand and Myanmar, and in Thailand it's called a patung.
There's definitely a little bit of a Southeast Asian feel to the society. partly just because they're all wearing lungies, but
Yeah. I mean, and also just because of how
and
strong
sandals.
it's sort of interesting how, like, intense the filial structure of the society is, particularly given how none of that is explicitly blood related at this point in the culture.
Right.
Except there is still distinction between highborn and lowborn people.
Right. And there is some distinction between a child that you have yourself, because Garel Kett, who is our rescued criminal, Air sister, I believe, was like specifically the biological child of their terrible dad, and was raised specifically to be his heir. But there's definitely, but I mean, because there's fostering a sort of conspicuous charity from the public orphanages, and then there's also fostering / adoption as a sort of complicated patronage system. Like, it seems like that has sort of taken the place of dynastic marriages.
Yeah, that seems about right. The society as it functions here is laid out in very broad strokes, but it doesn't feel like lacking to me. I feel it's like you could infer a lot from the small touches. It's just the sort of the way that the gender stuff isn't elaborated that feels like a bit of a missed opportunity.
Right.
The gender stuff is problematized, even though it isn't elaborated, because, as you say, her love interest, whose name is Talcris, thank you. I started reading another book between finishing this one, which I shouldn't do because the first thing that drops out of my mind are all the names.
Her love interest is specifically in a society that has 3 genders. She's, I guess, non-trinary.
Yes, she had to be pressured into choosing a gender to keep her job.
Right. Well, because so that she could actually
be legally employed. Because
right.
before she chose a gender, she was legally a child, and therefore
yes.
She was basically a very long intern at this place until her mid-20s before she opted for she/her, and therefore was gainfully employed for
right.
real, which is interesting.
Yes,
but again, is not really elaborated upon.
Yes,
very much.
We know that names are gendered.
Yes,
and so it's possible. Like, I think I get the impression, because Ingrid is always fussing with her hair, and no, very few of the other characters that we see really are, other than. It
is said that the only people who have short hair are children.
Right, the only people who have short hair are children. But Ingrid is like, but the need to have your hair either braided or pinned or covered in a scarf seems to be a female thing.
Ingrid's anxiety about her hairpins is extremely relatable to me as a man who's nearly 40, who has trouble keeping his shoes tied. I mostly wear Velcro. It's very interesting stuff. I as much as it goes against every fiber of my being to say this, I kind of wish this book was a little bit longer and a little bit more. We got a little bit more into, as we do, to the point of exhaustion with the aliens whose name I can't remember because apparently I have full-on aphasia right now. I was thinking of in the Foreigner books.
Oh, the Foreigner books.
I do remember the name of the Gek. The Gek are very interesting. Yes, the Atavi. Yeah. I would have liked a little, but there are no professional sociologists among our characters here, so we don't get to view the world through their eyes. So there's a lot of gender here.
There's a lot of gender here.
But there is, at the same time, not a lot of gender, which is just interesting, sort of an interesting dichotomy.
Right. It's
or trichotomy, as it were. That was exactly the laughter that joke deserved, so let's hear it one more time.
And it is interesting because I think to some degree it's similar to a specific vision that's in no way universal, but a specific vision that people have about like what, an egalitarian queer future would look like, is one that still has gender roles, but, there's an extra option for the non-binary people, and you get to choose, and there's no stigma against being trans, and there's no, sexism, but we still need gender roles, because otherwise we just get kind of uncomfortable. Um, and this is this does a good job of showing the ways in which that's better. Like, you're not going to have like if you're a trans kid, your life is going to just be a lot easier in this society. But it also does, it shows some of the ways that this does not fix all the problems of gender.
Dealing with gender in this way in no way, eliminates other kinds of discrimination, political and power inequalities, and just people in general being huge dicks to each other.
Right. There's also that.
Yes. Although, and the gender roles have definitely persisted to the point where the mom is terrible in a very specific, the terrible mom is terrible in a very specifically mom way, and the terrible dad is terrible in a very specifically dad way.
And then there's the ambassador, who's just a bad parent in her own alien way.
Oh, she gave me big bad mom vibes.
But see, okay, so here's the thing, honestly, though, is that imagine that the pronouns had been flipped. Imagine that everything we hear about, the Budrachem proculator is prolocutor. Prolocutor is, uses she, her. And everything about, Nitano uses he, him. Or they're all AM.
Nitano would still have come off as extremely femme.
Yeah, because she uses dear a lot.
Yeah, dear and darling, and her way of like being a politician is to express big performative upwellings of emotion. Whereas the prolocutor is Mr. Strong and Stable, who wanted to be the big tough negotiator.
But I feel like the Gek ambassador could go either way.
Yes, I mean the Gek ambassador also does not speak fluent, quote unquote English.
And of course the things that the Gek ambassador did that make her a particularly bad parent were could have been done when she was a different gender, because apparently she has gone through multiple genders.
Yeah, it's the sort of the thing about it that struck me as more mom-like than dad-like, if we're going to be juggling, stereotypes here, is, I mean, sure, the chasing the rebellious child across the universe because they betrayed and stole from you, that could be either, It's the continuing to chase the rebellious child across the universe because you want to apologize to him and you can't accept the fact that he wouldn't see you to apologize, to receive your apology in person, seems like more of on the bad mom front. But I don't want to be gender essentialist.
Right. And there's also the thing where we're bringing certain things of our own into this.
Of course.
Because
I'm totally willing.
There's definitely dads who, don't let go like that.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's the particular mournfulness of the Gek ambassador that gets to me about it. How she's, roiling away in her pool, being like, "Oh, woe is me," to poor what's her face, who was just like, "Can I go now?" But yes, no, I really enjoyed the aliens in general, and Captain Tick was, of course, my favorite character. Sassy, resourceful, gay. What's not to like?
Yeah. Well, gay in a certain sense. I mean, his love interest is Neiman. So.
Yes. I mean, and he himself was a creature, or was a human who was destined to become a fish person, and so,
Right.
Let's just say queer. Queer is a nice big umbrella.
Right. And one of the things that's also interesting is that we don't get any sense of forbidden what are the forbidden sexual or romantic relationships in this society.
Cross class seems to be the major one. Like,
sort of. I mean, we don't actually see like a cross class romance getting punished, do we?
No, we don't. But there's a lot of talk about who would be a suitable partner, isn't there? Or am I making that up?
I think you might be making that up.
I am totally making that up. This is Bleed Over from Priory of the Orange Tree. We've now officially read too many books. My mind library is getting crowded, and stuff is starting to ooze between the volumes.
Right. So yeah, there's, and it's also interesting. Some names are clearly gendered, because Taucris, when she finds out that the Taucris is taken, like Taucris takes the name Taucris after being Acris or whatever as a child, and so there's, you know, something gendered about your selection of name. But at the same time, a lot of people, the way that you inherit is you inherit the name and legal personhood of a parent or other, or you know, or other relative. And so, and those names clearly work cross gender because
Yeah, well, I mean, they're surnames though. I mean,
no, they're not, because they're all Ogs, because like Ingray's family are all Ogskolds.
right, but Naitano is the family name. It's like a name that you keep in a box.
Right, and also Ingray's nuncle Lack, is, you know,
I do love the nuthers and the nuncles.
The nuthers and the nuncles. Yeah. It's the thing I enjoy it because it definitely gives the feel of you're reading this story that's been translated into English from another language, and the translator is doing the best they can.
Yes.
Like, it's funny because this doesn't come with the kind of notes that, like, for example, you know, like faux academic notes like The City in the Middle of the Night has at the beginning.
Right.
But it manages to capture that feel actually in some ways better.
Yeah, indeed. It's not making a fuss about it. It's just like, well, you know, we're trying our best with what's available to us here.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask you just a question at random. Like, when you were reading this book, did you find yourself mentally assigning gender to the Neiman characters? Like a male or a female gender to them?
No. I mean, maybe when I first read it, I don't remember. It's, I think, a little bit for Palad, just because that name makes, for some reason, to me looked like Patrick.
Sure. I was definitely thinking of Nuncle Lack as Uncle Lack. I mean, part of that is just because he's not Ack, or not Knack, because that is very difficult to say, as I've just demonstrated.
Right.
But also because he has such big uncle energy in a certain way. Right.
You're
there you go.
misgendering him.
I've misgendered Nuncle Lack again, or for the first time. And also, you know, speaking of which, like,
but the thing
we
is,
also
like,
can tell that it's in translation because there's no way that anybody would use em as like a pronoun in the English language, because
there are actual people who have that pronoun, Isaac.
I know, but it's not, you know, it's not going to be a widely accepted thing just because it's very awkward to say in English. We don't like those stops in the way that it forces you to do. But anyway,
I'm just gonna leave it at there are actual people who somehow managed to make it work with having that be their pronouns. I think
literally all that I meant was that words like that tend to slide out of common usage in the same way that we don't say a napple, we say an apple. You can call yourself whatever you want, I don't care.
I feel like this book actually works well. This, I think, is actually you reading your ideas of gender onto these characters. And I mean, for Naitano, that makes sense, because you're right. She definitely does have, like, big bad mom energy.
I mean, she's also she/her.
She's also she/her. But, like, you know, that she does actually align to our American cultural idea of what a female politician and bad mom can look like.
Yeah.
But you know, if you were forced to gender Nuncle Lack with a gender that is not her actual gender,
You could go either way.
You could really go either way. That could definitely, because on the one hand, they kind of have big uncle energy. On the other hand, they also really have exasperated big sister energy.
There is that, yes. I'm now using the wrong pronouns for them because it's real easy for me to slip into they them for a non-gendered person or for a person who's not male or female. We'll forgive ourselves for misgendering the fictional characters in this instance.
Yes.
Yes, and as far as God damn, my brain, Taran Gall, the boy who's not a boy, which is my point.
Geralt Kett.
Geralt Kett, thank
also
you.
known as Palad Budrakem, but
yes.
but their chosen name is Geralt Kett, which they have purchased.
Air purchase. Well, it was in fact given to him rather than
which
purchased it.
Which Ingray purchased and then gave.
He purchased it.
Huh?
I said A purchased it, which is not one of the available pronouns. E purchased it.
No, she purchased it because it was Ingray who bought it.
Yes, no, she purchased it, gave it to M, and now E has it. Okay?
Yes.
Are we all good?
Yes, we are all good.
I definitely saw M as male. Partially, maybe this is just me defaulting anything to male that isn't actively being female at me, which would be, an unfortunate consequence of growing up male in the society that you grow up in.
Well, and that's one of the reasons I think why everybody is pronounced she in the Ancillary trilogy.
Oh yeah, no, that was definitely one of the exciting and interesting things about it is, reading that and sort of trying to get your brain around how that looks. And what that ended up with for me was me picturing just a lot of sort of slender androgynous weirdos.
But here's the interesting...
A planet full of Tilda Swintons, even though that isn't actually textually what was happening.
No, a lot of them are in fact actually quite broad. One of the little side things that I enjoy about all of the books set in this universe is that being broad in various ways is the standard of beauty. There's because there's station administrator seller or whatever in the second and third ancillary books who is supposed to be absolutely gorgeous and quite large, and it's also in this the standard of beauty is to be like broad and hefty.
Indeed,
because Ingray
as well
and
it
tall.
should be, said Isaac,
right.
with no personal interest in this whatsoever. Anyway, I'm a 6'3", 280 pounds. If you don't like my takes, I'll put you in the ground.
And Ingray is probably not skinny, given that her lungi wraps twice around Carol Cat.
Yeah, no, she's definitely texturally Zaftig.
But she's texturally Zaftig, but not tall and broad shouldered. So she's still, which makes her sort of. You can understand how she's attractive to the planetary safety officer, but is at the same time insecure about her looks.
Indeed.
And it's a nice touch to have the, pretty but maybe not exactly, but not exactly by society standards, protagonist be pudgy but not actually large enough by society's standards to be beautiful. But it's a nice touch because normally in fantasy and science fiction, is the person who is not pretty enough by society's standards is always skinny.
And by the same token, it shows that shifting the beauty standards does not actually remove the beauty standards. There are always going to be beauty standards. Who knows if that's true or not, but that's certainly posited in this view of sort of a future with very different ideas of gender and physical beauty. It's still, an important topic, who's prettier than who.
Yes.
In fact, it's, she seems to be under the impression that the fact that her brother is prettier than her is one of the leading factors in his inevitable accession to be heir.
Well, and given that,
In politics, that's
I
not
mean,
unrealistic.
well, and particularly given that the reason why everybody assumes that he's going to be heir is largely that he seems to have a certain something, which seems
Yes,
to
which
seems to
it
mostly
must be a coincidence that he is a boy, but it's meant to be noble blood.
It's meant to be noble blood, and also being conventionally attractive, and also the fact that we will get away.
He's a man of action, also.
Yeah, and also the fact that we will let charming assholes get away with a lot.
Indeed, I've lost count of the number of charming assholes we've read about over the course of this venerable podcast.
This is what I mean by actually, I'm gonna come back to this in a second. First, there's another thing I want to say about body type and gender, which is this is a rare example of there being non-binary characters of a variety of different body types.
That is true. That is true.
Nuncle Lack is stocky, and then Geralt Kett is sort of the classic, because one of my pet peeves is that it seems like every time you have an androgynous character in fiction, they're always sort of slender and Tilda Swinton, yes. Or if not Tilda Swinton, then some other form of thin. I mean, what they actually are is elven often. It's like the actual thing, and I mean, I understand that can be Tilda Swinton, but you can also get more sort of
Legolas.
Yeah, mischievous or whatever, and that I think is real common, and does not reflect my own experience with the non-binary people that I've known, where there's there's the occasional person who is slender and elfin, but you get the same range of body types that you do among any gender, I think. And if not more. And so it was real nice to see that you have Geralt Kett, who very much is of that type. But you also have, Nuncle Lack and the planetary safety officer. Not that I have a strong mental image of what the planetary safety departmental chief whatever is, but
yes. Thanks to the audiobook I do, but it's probably not accurate. But yeah, no, I agree with you. There's a lot of, I mean, in addition to the sort of general vibe of, we're going to have a comfortable, fun time, unraveling these political intrigues, and we're going to do it in a place where you're not going to have to contend with the usual array of gender and sexuality based garbage. Mm-hmm. Other kinds of garbage, certainly. Because you can't eliminate all of the garbage without messing with the verisimilitude. Mm-hmm. Which actually brings me to, I think, my favorite part of this book is how well drawn our main character, whose name I absolutely cannot remember. Thank you. Please be patient with me. There's something wrong with my brain. But how well drawn Ingray is as a privileged child. Speaking as as somebody who was and has been a privileged child in sort of similar situations to the way that she is, although not as privileged. The sort of the blithe assumption that heaven and earth will move from her. She doesn't actually need all of the documents to get this, human body onto somebody's ship because something will work out. She didn't really need to plan this in advance or decide whether it was feasible or not, but she's just going to go and do it because, the actual negative consequences that she's experienced from this sort of thing have been minimal throughout the course of her life, despite how, othered she feels by having, come from a public creche. Yes. She was still definitely brought up in privilege and has the assumptions that derive from that.
Yeah, sort of, though. I mean, and here's where, again, this actually works fairly well metaphorically as a queer story, is that it's very much about somebody who's grown up in a lot of privilege, but is acutely aware of how precarious that is.
Yes, exactly. But it's still, it still affects the way that they look at the world, in a particular way.
Yes.
And one of those ways is that how they enter into a casual privilege off with the precinct captain,
Right.
and come up short and are like, oh, I did, oh, I, oh,
But the thing is, I don't think that she's.
I'm just gonna leave now.
I don't think that she's trying to have a privilege off. I think what she's trying to do is be like, she's trying to relate this to her own experience, and she does understand some of the precarity, and there is a sort of universal human problem here of being the person who does not fit in, and who's does not have all of the social cred in a situation, and so that, I mean, I thought that was also a really well depicted scene, because it's you can understand why she's doing this and where she's coming from. I don't think that she's trying to have a privilege off. She's trying to go, oh, I understand how that feels. And she understands a little bit of how it feels, but at the same time, she clearly does not understand, like, the degree to which this is impacting the police chief's everyday life.
Yes. No, I didn't mean to suggest that she was going into it trying to one-up him. It was like, it's more just sort of she goes into it assuming that she can fully relate to his situation because she feels othered, and then is sort of brought up short by the...
I think that the station chief is also a Neiman, by the way.
Yes, you are correct.
I look forward to hearing the jingle you make up about pronouns.
As do I. There are a number of different angles that I could take on it, only some of which will get me canceled. I'm old and I'm stupid. I was raised by a Jungian who's very invested in the gender binary. I'm not, but I struggle. Please forgive me. But yes, and with apologies for continuing to misgender the third gender folks.
All the fictional characters.
Yes. But I thought that was probably one of my favorite scenes in the book. I did also, in terms of things that I really enjoyed about the book, the fiction, the society where people who are related in a certain way that is incomprehensible to us because it's incomprehensible to our viewpoint character, just can't even acknowledge the existence of said relatives.
They were fantastic, and the little aside about how exaggerating this to be an entire family of tourists, none of whom can speak to each other, is like the airline food joke of Ingres society, was a really nice touch. That's exactly the sort of little detail that makes a world feel well realized, I think.
I agree completely that it's when we have a culture, have a universe where there are so many different cultures, because this, one of the great things about the sort of Ratch or Ratchai books is that they do a very good job of communicating how vast the sprawl of human existence is at this point in time.
Yeah.
But in a way that just sort of brings home how vast the sprawl of human existence is now on this planet.
Yes.
So many different cultures and ways of approaching, we aren't actually a monoculture, no matter how much the Ratch think we are.
Right.
But yeah, it's like, this is our joke about the Osmonds, or whatever the name of that culture is. They're as if they were French, and we're making sort of baguette and striped shirt jokes.
Right, exactly. And that really, that sort of casual, just knowing what the airline food jokes are of a society is a great way to get a sense of what that society is. Like, knowing the ways in which they're sort of casually, xenophobic in a relatively harmless way towards people who at least see them, who are, from a more powerful and well-connected polity.
Yes.
So,
I was disappointed, incidentally, when it was revealed that all of the bots that are used in those situations are bright pink, because I was really enjoying the idea that lady was being murdered by her own like couture mech. Because she seems the sort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, she's awful. She's a great character.
Yeah.
So I want to come down to why this is kind of, even despite lacking a wizard, does a good job of sort of being in conversation with. Sorry, I keep using that. This is how we have to talk about our academic books.
It's fun. I mean, it's familiar to me from my days in academic lit
right,
crit.
no, I'm always having
just a brief wave of nausea I get when I hear it.
I know, I understand. On. It's just like I always have to explain this to authors in potential academic authors in language they can understand, and so it's always, well, because if you tell them competitive books and they have to tell you like all the books that that they're like, either there's no comparable books, there's no competitive books, or they feel like they have to explain exactly why their book is unique and special. And really all we want is just to know what are some similar books so that we know how to sell this thing. And so we always have to say, well, so to explain, what books are yours in conversation with? And so I apologize for the nausea, but this is just my life now.
Giving away the tricks of the trade.
No, look, I first of all, if any potential authors listening to this, that would be hilarious. I can't imagine anybody is so desperate to be published by my little imprint at Cornell University Press that they would, listen to my podcast in an attempt to figure out how to pitch a book to me.
That's Cornell University Press, if you've got an academic treatise that
right. Also, yeah, if any potential author is listening, yes, please do just talk to me about how to, the tricks of the trade, and I will tell you exactly how to write a proposal.
There you go. That's a public service announcement, right, which I will not edit out.
Okay. I'm not in trade publishing. If I were in trade publishing, somebody would be listening to this podcast. But anyway, so the conversation that these books are having is that even though it's a lot of the same themes as the Wizards versus Lesbians, because a lot of the themes that Wizards versus Lesbians books are dealing with, I feel like they're dealing with sort of with colonialism and with imperialism and with sort of the awareness that we all have these days of global politics. But they're also, a lot of them, dealing in a variety of different metaphorical ways with what trauma looks like and what being a queer child of, having terrible parents looks like. And this book is interested in those things. It still is looking at different metaphors for, the experience of being a queer child, and different metaphors for, or different like ways that trauma can express itself.
I will even add to that if you would like.
Please do. We're in conversation, you and I.
We are currently engaging in discourse. Another thing or common theme for the Wizards versus Lesbians books is the pursuit of immortality and the whole business about remnants, or not remnants. What are they called? Souvenirs.
Yes.
In this,
the vestiges.
Which is the vestiges. Thank you. Which is the sort of the central MacGuffin around which this plot turns, is that this particular culture just takes its souvenirs really, really, really seriously. It's historical artifacts, essentially. And that's why the book is called Provenance, even though I keep thinking it's Providence. This is an entire planet of autograph hunters, and people speculate on them as if they were NFTs. There's
our reference, which I'm really hoping will be super dated in a year.
No, we'll find some other Ponzi scheme to become invested in, but but it is sort of at the heart of the closest thing this book has to a wizard, which is Gul Dukat's bad dad.
Carol Katz.
Thank you.
Gul Dukat is from Deep Space Nine.
That was on purpose, at least.
Okay, that's good.
Anyway.
Sometimes it's hard to tell when you're that tired.
Anyway, this guy is willing to throw his own son into forever
Child.
space jail. Fuck, he's a Neiman, isn't he? Yes. This guy is. Surely there must be a specific gender, like Neiman term for son or daughter as well.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say nibbling.
But that's for niece or nephew. It has to either be none or naughter, clearly.
This guy is willing to throw his naughter into space jail forever.
Yes.
In order to preserve the sanctity of the family remnants, the family vestiges. And it is the sort of family above all, and the way that a specific person's name gets passed down from person to person here is all about the highest ideal that a person can have, even to the point of sacrificing themselves for it, is the immortality of the family line. And the proof of that immortality is in the vestiges, and the fact that all of the vestiges, or most of them, are fake that's why it's such a blow at the basis of this society, even though to outsiders it seems completely silly.
Right. Well, and so this is why both Prolocutor Budrichem and Natano both are kind of wizardy figures, because Natano is actually doing a lot of the wizardy things, and the setting her two children against each other for who gets to for basically who gets immortality.
Yeah, that's a super John from Harrow the Ninth thing to do.
Or Belthandros.
The Ninth thing to do, yes.
Danach is terrible. So, and he's not lovably terrible in the way that Tal is. He's just awful. I wish he suffered more than he does.
Attempted murder with an excavator, awful.
Right. I wish he suffered more, though I do like that, for the rest of their life, Ingray will be able to just sort of look at him and silently remind him that he owes his position to her.
He's so awful that a complete alien, from a completely different culture, is able to identify him as bad brother.
Right, it's just like, you are a terrible brother.
Yes, I'm going to strangle you with my biological spider mech now for being a terrible brother.
Well, more for the attempted murder by, excavator machine.
Yeah, but I mean, it's...
So...
She was very adamant about him being a terrible brother.
But okay, so this is why, secretly, this is a Wizards versus Lesbians book, because you have these powerful figures who sacrifice their children in a quest for immortality, and the thing that allows... one of the things that allows Ingray to break out of this and decide that she's going to, help her terrible brother instead of throwing him to the wolves, is that she does not want to disappoint this girl who has a crush on her.
Yes.
So,
yes.
This isn't,
yes, indeed.
Despite there's a lack of one single wizard, but to some degree this entire society is like a society where every parent is set up to be a wizard, every powerful person is kind of a wizard figure.
Yeah, no, I'll accept that. So this counts then as Wizards versus Lesbians for the reasons that we just laid out in 20 minutes. And the title of this podcast is not a thing that would be as much of a joke to outsiders as the vestiges of the air people.
I'm pretty sure the title of this podcast is already a joke to people. So...
Well, that's good, because I thought it was funny, and that's why it's called this.
Yes, that was because I told you that I would only do the podcast if we got to keep the name, because the name is hilarious.
Excellent. Did you really?
Yes.
Say that in some
Yes,
way?
you were like, because you were like, we should do a podcast, about Wizards versus Lesbians books. And then you were like, but don't worry, we don't have to call it that. And I was like, I'm only doing the podcast if we can call it that.
Good. And that's when I knew that we would be on the same page as far as the tone of this thing went.
Right.
But also thank you for policing my more unfortunate impulses in that regard.
But anyway, and so I do think that it is, again, this book has also made me think more about what makes the sort of the zeitgeist that is forming the wizards versus lesbians microgenre today. Because we talked a lot about politics and about sort of the rage at how broken the world is and how our leaders have failed us. But I also think that these stories tend to work because even for queer people who have supportive parents, most queer people of our generation and even the younger generations, I think, can understand where that feeling of precarity.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And
I think it is not uncoincidental that we are experiencing a boom in these books as the baby boom passes away. A generation of wizards, if there ever was one.
right.
I don't want to be rude, but it's like you were the biggest, the best, and the most powerful, and the most important, and you remain convinced of that to this day. And we're all dealing with the consequences of that at this point.
Right. And so that on the macro level and also on the micro level, it's the people who are our age, this is the first time where it's really become where major presses are interested in publishing, 90s brick but lesbians, or Ming Dynasty but lesbians, or space opera but lesbians. And so you have this entire generation of queer people who gets now to write all the fun things that we read growing up, but about us. And I think, unfortunately, the fact that abusive parents and trauma are a running theme in these books is not something that we can completely disentangle from the queerness of these books.
I would agree completely. It would take a monumental naivete to imagine that we are at a point in the society where that wouldn't be the case for the majority of people.
And I mean, and of course, queer people are the only ones with crappy parents. So,
oh no,
which is, I think, part of what part of why this boom is in the zeitgeist. It's not just that everybody, not everybody, but that lots of people think lesbians are hot. I think it is also that there's a lot of people who are, queer or straight, who are enjoying being able to see issues of my awful parents gave me PTSD worked out in fiction with spaceships and dragons and
absolutely
things like that.
And lesbians are, of course, the perfect character to identify with, because you can identify with lesbians if you're a lesbian. You can identify with lesbians if you're a straight man, because you're also attracted to women. You can identify with lesbians if you're a gay man because you're both gay, and straight women are largely notional anyway. So, increasingly rare.
Well, that's gonna get you canceled.
Yes, I know.
And is also
there will be an immediate apology jingle after that.
That's good.
Okay, past Isaac, you're on your own with this one. I don't know what you were trying to accomplish there.
That's also not true. Like you.
I know it's not. It was a joke.
I know. Look, you just I used to believe that, and then I went to grad school.
Yes.
And boy, is everybody at Princeton. I mean, there are gay people at Princeton, but there's some very straight people there.
I'm just saying that, like, among the target audience for this kind of book, sci-fi nerds, fantasy nerds.
It is true that,
I mean, there's what's her face for the straight women, the sharing knife, Buchholz, Lois McMaster Buchholz. She's for straight women, or Bujold. I don't know.
I don't know either.
This is a particularly lackadaisical episode of this podcast, for which I can only apologize.
No, we're doing our best here. Next week we are. Oh wait, did anything make you mad about this? First of all, did anything make you mad about this?
The only thing that I can think of is that the twists were not particularly twisty. You
right.
Pretty much knew everything that was going to happen before the characters did, which is a little bit tedious. But other than that, not really.
Yeah, no, it's a nice, light, fun book that other than the occasional murder. So next week we are doing The Thousand Eyes.
Yes, I'm a little ways into it now, but Alexis immediately messaged me being like, I should not have read this whole book over Shabbos. Oh my God.
Because I was reading it over Shabbos and I couldn't talk to anyone about it.
So I'm looking forward to discovering the horror.
I had so many emotions and I had to keep them all to myself.
Well, next week we will commit them to audio paper.
Oh, good.
And you can be here for that.
Or you can run far away. It is, as always, your choice.
Mm-hmm. But anyway, thank you for putting up with us. We'll see how much of this episode actually makes it into the final cut.
Yeah, this may be a slightly shorter episode. Well, you can fill it in with extra jingles.
Of course. I have an unlimited supply of those.
Excellent.
Good night, everybody.
Bye, everybody.